What is it about a show that truly captivates an audience? Is it the story? Is it the actors? Or is it the one who had the vision to bring all those things together to mold, perfect, and create such a masterpiece? I don't even have to explain to you what happens in your brain when you hear this. You probably immediately know what that is. That is how much the Twilight Zone is connected with each and every one of us in some form or another. With some of the most iconic creations having stemmed from the Twilight Zone itself, many things wouldn't be what they are without it. That's how iconic it is. Today, we are going to be taking a look at the history of the Twilight Zone, the man himself, Rod Serling, some of the reboots and recreation attempts, while trying to uncover what made and still makes it one of the most iconic pieces of media we will ever know. So, without further delay, let's jump in.
That's the signpost up ahead. Your next stop, the Twilight Zone.
So, to try and understand what made the Twilight Zone so incredible, we need to understand the man and the driving force behind it, and that man, of course, is Rod Serling. Rod Serling was born on December 25th, 1924 in Syracuse, New York. He was one of two boys from his parents Esther and Samuel Serling. Esther was a homemaker and his father had worked as a secretary and amateur inventor before taking a job from his father-in-law and became a grocer. In elementary school, Rod was always seen as the class clown, joking, making parodies, and getting people laughing. He was dismissed by almost all of his teachers. Thankfully, however, his 7th grade teacher, Helen Foley, saw something more. She encouraged him to join some public speaking extracurriculars, which of course he excelled in. It was at this time he began writing for his school newspaper, establishing quite the reputation as a social activist. Throughout his youth, he was also incredibly captivated by radio and, more importantly, thrillers, fantasy, and horror genres. He even did some staff work at a local radio station trying his hand at writing, though nothing of his at this time was ever published. In his senior year of high school, Rod was accepted into college. However, by this time, the United States was already involved in World War II. Since he was the high school newspaper editor at that time, he used the paper to encourage his fellow students to support the war effort. He even wanted to leave school before graduation to join the fight, but his civics teacher talked him into waiting till after graduation before enlisting, telling him, "War is temporary. It ends. Education doesn't. Without your degree, where will you be after the war?" Rod did decide to wait, and the morning after graduation, he went and enlisted in the U.S. Army. He began his military career in 1943 at Camp Toccoa. He served in the 511th Parachute Infantry Regiment of the 11th Airborne Division. On April 25, 1944, Serling received his first orders and saw that he was being sent west to California. This was disappointing to him. He knew that he wouldn't be fighting against Nazi Germany, but rather he would be fighting against Japan. Then in May, he was assigned to the Pacific Theater in New Guinea and then the Philippine Islands. November 1944 was the first time his division saw combat. Landing in the Philippines, the 11th Airborne Division was not used as paratroopers but as light infantry during the Battle of Leyte. His division helped secure the area after 5 divisions had gone ashore earlier. He saw the brutality of death every day while in the Philippines, not only at the hands of enemies, but also at the hands of his allies. He even saw a freak accident when his fellow soldier Melvin Levy was decapitated, when a food crate was dropped from a plane above, decapitating him. Serling led the funeral services for him, placing a Star of David over his grave. On February 3, 1945, the 511th Parachute Infantry Regiment landed on Tagaytay Ridge, met with the 188th Glider Infantry Regiment, and marched into Manila. During the next month, Serling's unit fought block by block for control of Manila. When portions of the city were taken back, the civilians showed their gratitude by throwing parties or banquets. It was during one of these parties Serling and his comrades were fired upon. Serling ran into the line of fire to rescue one of the performers who had been on stage. His final assignment was a part of the occupation force in Japan. Serling was awarded the Purple Heart, the Bronze Star, the Philippine Liberation Medal, among many others for his service. After being discharged from the army in 1946, he used the GI Bill's educational benefits and disability payments to enroll himself in Antioch College in Yellow Springs, Ohio. This was the college he was formally accepted to while still in high school. As a part of his studies, Serling became active in the campus radio station. He wrote, directed, and acted in many radio programs while on campus and also around the state as a part of his work studies. While at the campus radio station, it was here that he met Carol Louise Kramer, and the two would get married on July 31st, 1948. They would go on to have 2 daughters, Jody, born in 1952, and Anne, born in 1955. It was also in college that Serling won his first accolade as a writer. The radio program Dr. Christian started an annual scriptwriting contest 8 years earlier. Serling won a trip to New York City and $500 for his radio script titled To Live a Dream. Rod and Carol attended the awards broadcast on May 18, 1949, where he and the other winners that year were interviewed. In the fall of 1949, Rod Serling submitted a boxing script to Martin Horrell of the radio program Grand Central Station, which was known for its romances and light dramas. This script was rejected, so he resubmitted a lighter piece called Hop Off the Express and Grab a Local, which became his first nationally broadcasted piece on September 10, 1949. His prize-winning Dr. Christian's script To Live a Dream didn't end up airing until November 30, 1949. Rod eventually changed his major to literature and earned his Bachelor of Arts degree in 1950. After college, he began his professional writing career that same year, where he earned $75 a week as a network continuity writer for WLW Radio in Cincinnati, Ohio. As time went on, his wife recalled Rod just up and quitting one day in the winter of 1952 and deciding to move the family to Connecticut early in the year of 1953. After moving to Connecticut, Rod made a living by writing scripts for anthology shows such as Kraft Television Theater, Appointment with Adventure, and Hallmark Hall of Fame. By the end of 1954, his agent had finally convinced him to move to New York, where all the action was. His writing gradually started to truly gain attention. In 1955, the Kraft Television Theater aired a program based on Rod's 70-second script. To him, this was just another script. He even missed the first broadcast, telling his wife no one would call because we had just moved to town. Not only were critics praising it everywhere, but the episode really struck a nerve with audience members as well, and due to popular demand, it was aired a second time. The New York Times even praising this episode as one of the high points in the TV medium's evolution and a creative triumph for Mr. Serling's work. After the original broadcast, Rod was overwhelmed with job offers, congratulations, and requests for novels, plays, television, or radio scripts. He sold many of his earlier scripts and watched in disbelief at how many of them were actually published, many of which had been previously rejected. Then, in the fall of 1957, Serling made the tough choice to move his entire family to California. The entire industry was shifting from the East Coast to the West Coast. It was after this move, and after years of constant battling, censorship, corporate overreach, and studios or networks changing things he wrote and destroying the messages he truly wanted to share, he finally had enough. So he decided the only way to avoid interference was to finally create his own show. Little did he know, that wouldn't help at all. In his own words, he put it like this.
I don't want to fight anymore. I don't want to have to battle sponsors and agencies. I don't want to have to push for something that I want and have to settle for second best. I don't want to have to compromise all the time, which in essence is what the television writer does if he wants to put on controversial themes.
He submitted the script The Time Element to CBS, intending for it to be the pilot for his new weekly show he titled The Twilight Zone. However, CBS instead decided to use it for a new show produced by Desi Arnaz and Lucille Ball called Westinghouse Desilu Playhouse in 1958. It aired Monday, November 24th, 1958.
And welcome to another Westinghouse Desilu Playhouse. Tonight we're gonna see a story written by Rod Serling.
And just like in the past, it was praised by everyone who saw it. CBS finally agreed to let Serling go ahead with his own pilot for The Twilight Zone. On October 2nd, 1959, The Twilight Zone finally premiered. Serling would use his own life experiences and views to tackle a lot of societal issues. Our fears, our hate, our societal standards on things like beauty or gender roles, our love, our traumas. He would challenge them, and all of these things and ideas, Serling would constantly present them to us in ways we never expected or flip them on their heads. The Twilight Zone would air for 5 seasons, but it's worth mentioning that it was actually canceled twice and revived during its original run from 1959 to 1964. After 5 years and 156 episodes, Rod had become tired of working on the series, so when it was canceled for the last time, he decided it was better to not oppose its final cancellation. Eventually, Rod did sell the rights of The Twilight Zone to CBS. In between 1966 and 1969, Rod would write, oversee, and be a part of many productions. But later in 1969, NBC would air a new series titled Night Gallery. Set in the after hours of a dimly lit museum, Rod played the curator. He He would introduce and present 3 tales that mostly focused on horror and suspense. Rod would ultimately write over a third of the scripts on the show itself, but by season 3, however, most of his scripts were being rejected or heavily altered. Finally, after 4 years, the Night Gallery was cancelled in 1973. NBC then chose to combine episodes of the short series The Sixth Sense with the Night Gallery to increase its episode numbers for syndication. I also want to mention, as a little side note, that Serling did participate in a few commercials during his time on the Night Gallery. He did commercials with Ford, Radio Shack, and Mazda. He also appeared in an episode of Ironside titled Bubble Bubble, Toil and Murder, which actually featured a young Jodie Foster. After the Night Gallery in 1973, he would return back to radio with the Zero Hour, which was also known as the Hollywood Radio Theater, and it ended in 1974. His final radio performance was on Fantasy Park, which was a 48-hour-long rock concert aired by almost 200 radio stations throughout 1974 and 1975. Oh yeah, and it was completely imaginary. It was an odd event, but it worked. And sadly, Rod Serling had a heart attack on May 3rd, 1975. He was hospitalized and spent 2 weeks at Tompkins County Community Hospital before being released. He then had a second heart attack 2 weeks later, which forced doctors to agree that open heart surgery, although risky at the time, was required. The 10-hour procedure was performed on June 26th. It was here, on the operating table, that Rod had a third and final heart attack. Tragically, he died 2 days later at the Strong Memorial Hospital in Rochester, New York. On June 28, 1975. He was only 50 years old. His funeral and burial took place on July 2nd at Lakeview Cemetery in New York, and a memorial was held at Cornell University's Sage Chapel on July 7, 1975. After Rod's passing, his legacy continues to live on. Over the following decades, and even up until recently, there have been many attempts at rebooting, reviving, or renewing this beloved series. And don't get me wrong, I still love and loved all of them. I have watched them many, and I mean many times, but it's just that little extra charm that seems to be missing from all of them. So the first revival happened in 1985, and that only lasted 3 seasons and aired from 1985 to 1989. And yes, there was a movie in 1983, but that was just a single movie and not an actual series. It had a wide range of famous actors, including ones like Morgan Freeman, Bruce Willis, Emmett Walsh, Martin Landau, Robert Downey Sr., Terry O'Quinn, and many more. So it wasn't lacking in that department. Hell, a lot of actors got their start in things like The Twilight Zone. I mean, our beloved Captain Kirk, William Shatner, also starred in the original Twilight Zone episodes Nick of Time in 1960 and Nightmare at 20,000 Feet in 1963. Leonard Nimoy played a minor role in the episode A Quality of Mercy in 1961, and George Takei starred in the episode called The Encounter in 1964. This episode, however, was banned pretty much permanently from syndication for almost 52 years. And yes, I only found out about this fairly recently. Having watched this episode on DVD, I didn't know it was banned at all. It was only in 2016 was it finally allowed to be aired again. From the 80s version, the next following revival we got was the 2002 version. Now this one didn't even get the chance for anything more than 1 season. It had a few good episodes, but overall, it definitely really missed the mark with this one.
I have a sunflower on my ass if you're interested.
Out of all the Twilight Zone series, this one just felt like it lacked creativity. The stories weren't the best, and the conclusions or the payoffs at the end really didn't land that well. I mean, it isn't terrible or anything, and I still enjoy it from time to time, but the magic is definitely not there. And it definitely is not one of my go-tos when I get that Twilight Zone itch. And in contrast to the 80s version, the 2002 version really doesn't stand up. Maybe that is the lack of time or seasons it had to be given the chance to blossom. But it had over 40 episodes, and if 40 episodes can't capture the audience, well no studio is going to continue to run it or want to create it. That's a waste of money, and that would be silly. After the 2002 revival, the last and most recent attempt we had was the 2019 version. Now, CBS actually running this one for their streaming platform, you would think this would be a no-brainer for them. They needed to nail it, and sadly, they did not. It was poorly reviewed by a lot of people, and again, it just missed the mark in many ways, and I don't think I'm alone in thinking that. Even the 2002 series, I think it showed more potential. This one, however, was the shortest running Twilight series ever. Literally, it only had 20 episodes and was canceled after 2 seasons. And again, don't get me wrong, I still enjoyed it. I really did. I was excited to get a new Twilight Zone, but there were only a few good episodes, and then most of them just kind of put me off. So most of the reviews I read at the time were people saying it was too political, And well, I don't really think that is fair to just say on its own. Twilight Zone has always been very political and social justice-y. Is that a word? Rod was a very open social activist throughout his entire life and his career, but I think there was a massive clear difference between the original to the most recent revival. See, Rod Serling wanted to include things point blank like a lot of the episodes from the 2019 version, but due to censorship, he couldn't. So because of that, he had to be clever about including those messages to get around the censorship. And I think because of that, it not only made the messaging better, but also made the issue at hand feel more relatable to a wider audience. There is this beauty in a sort of creative workaround he had to do to spread those messages. And don't get me wrong, he probably would have liked to have them at the forefront. However, he didn't have a choice. Censorship back then was so much more heavy-handed that he had to be incredibly creative if he wanted to include those messages. So oddly, I'm kind of thankful for that censorship in the original. I know that's weird to say, but it made the stories the focus while still delivering an important message. I know this might be a bit of a tangent, but I want to explain a bit better as to why I think the 2019 version failed. You see, when something point blank is thrown in your face, it becomes incredibly off-putting. No matter what the message is, right or wrong, the people you are trying to reach with that message will never want to agree with you or take that side. It doesn't matter how effed up it may be to disagree with it. Hell, they might even actually agree with you, but they'll still reject it. It doesn't matter what it is. The feeling of being forced to say, think, or do something will instantly make people dig their heels in and say no thanks, F that. The pushback against it will be 10 times more when it comes off as forceful, pushy, or demanding. And I think that is part of what was so off-putting in the 2019 Twilight version to a lot of people. They were more in your face and blunt about their points rather than being creative and trying to incorporate those things cleverly within the story itself.
So back the fuck up!
A lot of the episodes felt like they were more, here's our message, see how screwed up this is, rather than here's our story with an important message that's relatable. And I feel it's worth saying, as humans, for the most part, we don't have to be a part of a group, identity, religion, sex, or race to understand the plight of said thing. If spoken, told, or delivered correctly, most people, messages, or issues can instantly become sympathetic, empathetic, and relatable to almost everybody. We have all had our struggles that can be interwoven and connect us to said thing, whether that be something like discrimination, mistreatment, mental health issues, substance abuse issues, or so many other things. If it's delivered properly, we all can and will connect with it on some level. It becomes relatable. But when delivered poorly, that feels blatantly thrown in your face for the sake of putting it in your face, well, yeah, it makes sense it will get a giant pushback from the people you are trying to reach. No one likes being preached to or at. It's human nature to resist something that feels forced, and it's more prevalent nowadays than ever, so people have their guard up about it. A lot of shows go about pushing their messaging in completely wrong ways. Maybe that is a lack of creative thinking or creative writing, or just a lack of hiring the appropriate people who are creative enough to push that messaging in the right way, but this sort of pandering seems to be incredibly widespread, and even a person like myself who mostly supports all of those messages or statements, it's even incredibly off-putting to me. So I can only imagine how off-putting it is to the people who don't initially care at all about those things. Nowadays, people aren't dumb when it comes to these things. Hell, they're mostly looking for it. So when they see it, they're gonna push back against it when they see it as just pandering. There needs to be better creative ways to include that messaging in the story itself. When it's so blatantly obvious, well, of course it's not a shock why these things fail. Maybe that is far-fetched of me to say, but in my opinion, that is quite an accurate reasoning to why these things never work and typically always fail. And no, I'm not going to say the typical catchphrase that people continually and always use, because I think that phrase sounds asinine and is incredibly overused. Yes, it may be true, but I'd rather be productive, try and figure out the cause, and try to understand as to why something happens rather than just laugh at the failures. That in the end helps no one. Look, honestly, I'm okay with having real issues in shows. I'm okay with shows displaying and paralleling issues so we can all understand them or relate to them. But I'm not okay with bad writing for the sake of implementing those issues. If the story suffers because of your need or want to include them and you can't creatively figure out a way to include them, well, that's on you for it failing, not on us. So please, if anyone from any studio or Hollywood for that matter ever sees this or is watching, please Just be more creative about it. Come up with better ways of spreading those messages before another attempt is ruined. I don't know. I also wanted to add in, maybe in 2019, it was just the wrong time for it to be revived. By that point, we had many anthology series out, so our choices were pretty damn big, and the bar was set pretty high. We had things like Black Mirror, Love, Death and Robots, Creepshow, and many more. So especially for what we got, it didn't live up in storytelling nor in quality to those other ones. Yeah, it was fun yelling at the screen being like, that's from the original, and seeing the Easter eggs throughout its run, I can't deny that was really fun, and I enjoyed it overall, but looking back, it just simply missed the mark, and that sucks. What made the original so magical, so captivating, and so memorable? I'm constantly drawn back to the original and just fixated and captivated by each and every episode. Yeah, some were not as good as others, but even in the bad episodes or ones I didn't like all that much, I can't help but watch them to the very end. They had a way of truly wedging themselves into your brain and just keeping you watching and thinking about them over and over. Even to this day, I still use random quotes from episodes. Episodes like Time Enough at Last, a tale about a man who just wants to read, but at every turn he gets ridiculed for it, and when the world is finally destroyed and he finds all the books he could ever want, his glasses get broken and he can't read any of them.
That's not fair. That's not fair at all.
And then there's iconic episodes like The Monsters Are Due on Maple Street, The Obsolete Man, To Serve Man, Nick of Time, A Stop at Willoughby, The Midnight Sun, It's a Good Life, and so many more. If I listed every iconic or great episode, we would be here for hours. There's so many from the original Twilight Zone, and so many of these incredible episodes would go on to inspire some of the greatest shows, films, and franchises that we know today. And many famous directors and writers take their inspiration from Rod Serling and things like The Twilight Zone. I honestly think it's one of the greatest influential shows that has ever been created. Some of the most iconic things that exist today are directly or indirectly because of The Twilight Zone and Rod Serling himself. The way Rod Serling was able to deliver a compelling story while sprinkling in some nuggets of wisdom or truth about our species and time on this planet, I don't think it will ever be recaptured. It makes you question a lot of things when you watch each episode. Sometimes good, sometimes bad. And sure, the revivals may not be as impactful or memorable as the original to me, but they do have their own place in the history books for the Twilight Zone, and regardless, I do from time to time find myself putting them on and just binge watching them. Maybe I'm just a huge stan and fanboy for Rod Serling. Maybe I'm a bit obsessive when it comes to the Twilight Zone and feel they missed the mark on the revivals. But at the end of the day, I'm still very happy we got them, and I'm very happy in some way, or at least in some capacity, that the legacy of Rod Serling forever carries onward. He was truly one of a kind, and no matter how hard anyone tries, I don't think that level of literary genius can very often or will ever be replicated. To achieve something as wonderfully captivating and magical as the original Twilight Zone, I think that's a bar that's virtually impossible to reach. It's a standard that may never be able to be achieved again. There has only ever been, and only ever will be, one Rod Serling. Well, that about wraps up this video. I think I covered most of what I wanted to about the Twilight Zone. There's probably lots of information I may have missed or should have included, and if I did, please do let me know in the comments below. I loved hearing all of your thoughts and discussions we had from my last video, and if you made it this far and have watched to this point, truly, I cannot say this enough. Thank you. It is absolutely incredible, and I'm just blown away by the reception, kindness, and feedback that everyone has been giving me from my videos. Never did I expect my videos or my random nonsense to receive such a positive, or any attention for that matter, so I'm honestly just absolutely dumbfounded by it. And the last Severance video I did was over 5,000? Like, what? What? That's just crazy to me. What in the hell? It's just crazy to me. And honestly, whether it be one person, 10 people, 100 people, or 1,000 people, I truly cannot thank you enough for taking time out of your day and watching my videos. It's just absolutely mind-blowing to me. So I don't think I will ever be grateful enough for the kindness you've shown and taking the time to watch these. So truly, thank you. So if you've never experienced the unique magic of the original Twilight Zone, or if it's been a while since your last trip into the 5th dimension, it's time to give it another watch. And as always, don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss a single video that gets released. Thanks again for watching. God, I love Rod Serling.